Alright, this is Mr. S, Naka Environmental Science, and today we're talking about 8.9, solid waste disposal. And you can pause the video and read the essential knowledge that you need from this, but the main learning objectives are for you to be able to describe solid waste disposal methods in detail and describe the effects of solid waste disposal methods, and then at the end, be able to use data and evidence to support a potential solution. Alright, so here are the waste types and sources. So the first one is municipal solid waste. Municipal means from a city, so households, business, schools, etc. AKA trash, litter, garbage. Waste stream refers to the flow of solid waste to recycling centers, landfills, or trash incineration facilities. Alright, and you can see this is the amount of national average of how much waste we produce in various areas. Then there's e-waste, and that's old computers, TVs, phones, and tablets. And only 2% of MSW, municipal solid waste, is considered hazardous waste due to metals like cadmium, lead, mercury, and PBDs, fireproof chemicals. These things can leach endocrine disrupting chemicals out of landfills if thrown away with regular MSW. So this should be disposed of at special facilities that recycle the parts. So phones and batteries and things like that, they cause a lot of pollution because they have a lot of heavy metals in them, right? Alright, so there's sanitary landfills, and that's just a word lingo for landfills where developed nations dispose of trash. And that's different from a dump, which are just areas where trash is dumped without the features below. So this is what makes something a landfill. They always line the bottoms with clay or plastic, and that prevents pollutants from leaking into the soil or groundwater. And then there's a leachate collective system. So there's a system of tubes and pipes at the bottom to collect whatever leaches, the water draining through the waste for treatment and disposal. So they get rid of that water that leaches through. And then methane can also be used to generate electricity or heat buildings. So pretty cool. In Portland, Oregon, they do this a lot, where they just put tubes and pipes into here, and that collects the methane produced by anaerobic decomposition, anaerobic without oxygen, right? And so then they can harvest that methane and use it to generate electricity or heat buildings. And then there's a clay cap. So clay soil mixture used to cover the landfill once it's full. And that keeps out animals and keeps in the smell and allows vegetation to regrow. So a lot of times this will be like underground. Like you won't even see it. It'll look like a green hill. Okay, so landfills generally have very low rates of decomposition due to little oxygen, moisture, and organic material combining. And since those three things are very rarely present together in landfills, there's little decomposition that occurs, and landfills typically remain about the same size as when they were filled. So they don't really go anywhere. We found 40-year-old newspapers found in a landfill, which, newspapers would normally break down pretty quickly. And then these are how long all these things take to decompose. Especially in a landfill, it takes a really long time. Like a newspaper, 6 weeks maybe if it was buried into some moist compost, but in a landfill, it might stay there for much longer, like 40 years. But you can see plastic bags. It says 10 to 20 years here, but that might be to break into smaller pieces. Plastic can last thousands of years, right? And then things that can't go in the landfill are hazardous waste like antifreeze, motor oil, cleaners, electronics, car batteries. Metals like copper and aluminum can be recycled. Old tires that get left in large piles, they hold standing water that causes a lot of mosquitoes to breed. You can see like that there. And then things that should be in the landfill are cardboard and food wrappers that have too much food residue and can't be recycled. Rubber and plastic films and wraps. Styrofoam can't be recycled. And then food, yard waste, and paper can and do go into the landfills, but they should be recycled or composted. It's easy to compost your food or yard waste and paper. So, the issues with landfills are that they have environmental impacts like groundwater contamination, and they release a lot of greenhouse gases. Groundwater can be contaminated with heavy metals like lead, mercury, acids, medications, and bacteria. And if that leachate leaks through the lining and into the soil and groundwater beneath, that can ruin the whole groundwater system. Greenhouse gases are released from landfills due to decomposition, and those both contribute to global warming and climate change. NIMBY, not in my backyard, is an idea that communities don't want landfills near them for a number of reasons, and that ends up getting deflected to people of color and low-income communities that have to deal with these issues. It causes, there's smell and sight. It attracts rats and birds, and they should be located far from rivers and streams and neighborhoods, but that's not always the case. So you can see that pollution that can get all the way into the community. So landfills are often placed near low-income or minority communities that don't have the resources or political power to fight against these decisions, like I said. So waste incineration and ocean dumping, right? Waste can be incinerated or burned to reduce the volume that needs to be landfilled. And since most waste, paper, plastic, food, is hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen, it easily burns and combusts at a high temperature. It can reduce the volume by 90%, but it also releases CO2 and air pollutants. And then that ash left over contain toxic metals and is stored in the ash ponds and then taken to special landfills that are specifically for those heavy metals. Toxic metals can leach out of the storage ponds or be released into the atmosphere. So there's pretty serious issues with the pollution that comes from those places. And then it can be burned to create electricity. And places like Sweden are doing this, and they put in scrubbers to scrub the air of the pollutants, and they're actually doing it pretty cleanly. And they're getting to a point where they actually can import trash from other countries and make money while providing electricity to their residents. So it's a really good solution, in my opinion. Illegal ocean dumping occurs in some countries with few environmental regulations or lack of enforcement. So a lot of countries in Africa and Asia and places like that is where a lot of the plastic and pollution in the ocean is coming from. And plastic especially collects into large floating garbage patches in the ocean. And this can suffocate animals if they ingest it or entangle them so they can't fly, and then they can make them starve. All right. So here's the practice FRQ. I want you to look at this diagram for the municipal stream waste in the United States and provide a solution that the federal government could enact that would reduce the volume of waste entering landfills in the U.S. by at least 15%. Use evidence from the graph above to support your proposed solution. All right, that's all for today. Thank you for your efforts. See you soon.